We get it, this girl likes rocks. Does she have literally any other personality traits? And I think the answer is no. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm here today to talk about the books that I read in September, part 2. This video is late. Part 1 of my September wrap-up was the 10 quote-unquote adult genre books that I read in September. This is part 2 of that video, and here's where I'm going to be chatting about the 8 YA young adult books that I got up to in September. Sorry that I'm late, but better late than never. That's the thing. So here we go. First book that I'll chat about is Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. This book, I had no idea what it was going in, and oh my goodness, I'll just put it out front. This was a 5-star read for me. This is a memoir infused with elements of magical realism. I love magical realism in books. I love memoirs. So the combination of those two things I was totally here for. It follows Echo Brown through childhood right up until the end of high school, her experience growing up, and not just her experience growing up, but her experience growing up as a wizard. Her mother is a wizard, and she discovers that she's also a wizard, and throughout the book she's learning these different lessons of wizardry. It tells a lot about her experience growing up, facing racism, facing sexism, facing poverty, these things at tension with these lighter, more magical elements, and how she uses magic to cope. This book did make me cry, I think on more than one occasion. It was really excellent. And yeah, it is a YA, but I think is a heavier, slightly more mature YA. I would absolutely recommend this. It was a really excellent book. Second one I'll talk about is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha. A couple years ago, this is not a book that I would have picked up because it is a fantasy book, and I have not considered myself a person who likes fantasy. Girls of Paper and Fire is a high fantasy book that takes place in a world where 3 castes exist. So there's a human caste, a demon caste, and then sort of an in-between human-demon. Demons are the most powerful and humans are the least powerful. This world is ruled by the Demon King, and every year the Demon King is presented with 8 of the most beautiful human caste girls in the kingdom who basically are forced to partake in coerced sex work. The idea of this book is harrowing. Be aware of it going in. Girls of Paper and Fire follows our main character who is brought to the kingdom as one of these paper girls. She is there absolutely against her will. She chooses to not just sort of give in to what she's expected to do in this role. She's very eager to sort of push back against the position and make it clear that she doesn't want to be there, while simultaneously following a budding romantic relationship between her and another paper girl. The world building in this was incredible, and I think I just, maybe because I don't have a lot of experience with fantasy, I was so taken aback by how curious I was by this world that was created and these castes and these systems that were in place. I thought it was so cool, and I was so invested in it. I love that it was a queer fantasy. The relationship between the 2 paper girls isn't like super well developed. It's not the focal point of the book, but it is nice that it's kind of happening in the backdrop, and cool to get not just queer rep, but also Asian rep. The world is kind of intended to be inspired from both China and Malaysia. This idea of like resilience and resistance I think was really cool. I was just really excited to be like, oh my goodness, I like fantasy as a genre maybe. Next, I will chat about Slay by Brittney Morris, another book that I was skeptical going into. It centers around a role-playing game, an online RPG, think Dungeons and Dragons type game, which I just quite frankly have no interest in. I've never played an RPG game, but this book had really good ratings and I thought I would give it a go, and I loved it. This was such a good book and it really took me by surprise. This follows our main character Ciara, who is a high school student. While her friends and her family and no one in her life knows this, she is actually responsible for having created and coded and is maintaining this online RPG game that is designed specifically for Black folks and centers around different elements of Black culture. So she's like living her life as a high school student, but kind of on the side managing this online game world, and nobody in her life knows about it. I was so invested in like the elements of the game itself. Was so cool. The book is mainly told from Ciara's point of view, but every once in a while you get chapters from her co-creator, from other people in the world playing the game. The commentary that's in this book around racism, around Black culture, around misogynoir, and like the specific forms of discrimination and oppression that Black women face, and about sort of the idea of safe spaces and spaces that are designated and designed specifically for groups of people who face oppression. This is a fictional book that I thought was so fun, so interesting, so engaging, and also something that I learned a lot from and that really made me think. Such a good read. And I just realized I am like a monster who never takes, I read hardcover books with the sleeves on. Look how pretty the cover is. Do I need to take all of the sleeves off my books and look at them? Maybe. The only kind of downside for me of this book, there is somebody in the game who is threatening Ciara and who is compromising this idea of a safe space. This is kind of one of the central conflicts of the book. The resolution to that felt a little bit quick to me, and the conflict is resolved in the context of like a formal criminal justice system. And there's a couple paragraphs where there's like a bit of a back and forth around, is this the appropriate way to deal with this? And like the challenges of things going through our police and our prison systems. And like, it's a YA book. There was a little bit of exploration into the implications of why it was resolved in that way. I almost kind of wished for more from it. This will make a lot more sense if you read the book, but I don't want to spoil it. If you read it and like want to have a chat about it, I would love it. I could just be wrong. I like fully accept that, but regardless of this like mini kind of confusing rant towards the end, an excellent book. This was fantastic. Moving slightly away from books that I will more unequivocally gush about, I'm gonna kind of talk about 3 books in tandem that were YA sapphic romance books of varying quality in my mind. The first one is Hot Dog Girl by Jennifer Dugan. This book follows a bisexual teenage girl named Eloise who basically has this huge crush on this guy named Nick and fake dates her best friend, who is also a woman, to kind of have an opportunity to double date with this Nick guy and his girlfriend. The setting of this book was very fun. So it's all set in this amusement park, and it's called Hot Dog Girl because our main character Eloise, her job in the amusement park is to be this like hot dog mascot. So she spends her days wearing like a giant hot dog costume and like walking around this amusement park, which was very funny. This book was like really average for me. I thought it was cute. I didn't find the main character particularly likable. The kind of fake dating trope, maybe it just doesn't really do it for me because I was not that invested in that. I felt bad for her friend. It just felt like she was using her friend to me. The kind of uncomfy trope about bisexual women just dating other women to kind of get the attention of men. A kind of side story that's happening this entire time is Eloise trying to save the amusement park that she's working at because the owner announced that he's closing it down. I just kind of found that whole effort a little bit annoying. Not to like spoil her ambition. She like tries to have a bake sale. How many cookies do you think you're gonna sell? It wasn't bad. It's not one that I'm going to be like recommending to people. Directly after I read Hot Dog Girl, I read the Falling in Love montage by Ciara Smyth, or Smyth, which follows our main character Saoirse, who is a lesbian teenager living in Ireland who meets a girl at a party. They kind of decide that they're going to spend the summer playing off of tropes in romantic comedy films, motivated by the fact that queer women aren't usually the focus of romantic comedies, and when you see lesbians in romance films, the endings are usually like horrible and dark. Saoirse has been really hesitant to date, specifically because her mom has early onset dementia, and there's a likelihood that she's also going to have the same condition, so she basically has decided that it's pointless for her to be dating or really thinking at all about her future. I liked this better than Hot Dog Girl. The family dynamics that were happening in the backdrop of this book in terms of her relationship with her mom, her dad getting remarried, that made the plot a lot more rich than the kind of maybe like a little bit more shallow kind of background for Hot Dog Girl. Saoirse wasn't my favorite character. She's very stubborn. She wasn't particularly nice to her dad, which made me sad. And a lot of the conflict in this book comes out of her own stubbornness. And like she's facing a lot of struggles, obviously, but so much of the conflict comes from her being like, nope, I can't date. Nope, I can't tell anybody about what's going on in my family. Almost kind of frustrating to read. There's an alternative to this where you just be a little bit more open I think I gave Hot Dog Girl 3 stars. Falling in Love Montage was more of like a 3.5 stars. Then I read Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins, which is another queer sapphic YA romance. This one I was more excited for. I knew a little bit more about it going in, and specifically what I had heard was if you like Red, White, and Royal Blue, Her Royal Highness is a really excellent choice. So I was pretty excited about that. Her Royal Highness follows our main character Millie, a young bisexual woman in high school. Basically the book begins and she's just had this horrible breakup with her like kind of best friend, kind of girlfriend, and at the same time she is accepted to go to this very fancy boarding school in Scotland and ends up rooming with Princess Flora, who is the Princess of Scotland, which doesn't exist, but we're just gonna pretend that that doesn't matter. Kind of like an enemies to lover situation where they room together and like sparks fly and then like conflict. We love a queer romance and we love the royalty and the princess. The book had a lot of potential for me and it ultimately delivered on none of it. There are two main things here. One, the main character, Millie Quint. Dear God, that's the most annoyed I've been by a main character in a while. Throughout the book, it's just like, oh, like I'm this average looking American. Why would the Princess of Scotland ever like someone like me? Once was fine, twice was fine, but then it's like, we get it. Like you have this inferiority complex and you think that the princess is beautiful. It gets old pretty fast. Her characteristics as a person, she just didn't feel like a very well-developed character to me to begin with. I don't like when authors give a character like a trait or an interest or something and then just that is their entire personality, and that is kind of what I got from Millie. She has some like fascination with geology and rocks. Throughout the book it's like, ahaha, Millie has this like rock shirt. Oh my god, she has rocks on her dresser. Oh my god, she loves the rocks in Scotland. And I'm like, cool, we get it. This girl likes rocks. Does she have literally any other personality traits? And I think the answer is no. Other than insecurity. She's insecure and she likes rocks. Fine, I'm not saying there's anything wrong about it, but do I want to read an entire book about that? And the pacing, by the time you kind of realize that they have feelings for one another, there's conflict and the book ends. The last 50 pages literally gave me whiplash. Things happened so quickly, and then the end of the book I was like, is this seriously how this book is going to end? If you want a representation of a relationship between two women, one who's bisexual, one who is a lesbian, I think that it's great for that. I saw other reviewers comment on how casual the idea of sexuality is and the fact that like that is not a source of conflict really. The setting of this fancy boarding school where there's all these royal fancy families I thought was also fun. Some of the side characters were fun, but the romance was just was not it for me. So I gave it 2 stars. I didn't like it. It wasn't what I wanted. It is what it is. I need some water. So I finished these 3 books, Hot Dog Girl, Falling in Love Montage, and Her Royal Highness, and was feeling quite, what is wrong with this picture? I should be liking these books. These are books that in theory I should be enjoying. And then I had a moment where I was like, am I too old? Is part of the problem here that I struggle to get invested in a high school romance book, which like makes sense. It's been a minute since I was in high school. Maybe what I'm kind of reading in these YA romances as just being like underdeveloped or the conflict isn't quite there for me is just because we're talking about 11th graders. Fair. So I was like doing some pondering on this and having the thoughts of maybe I'm just too old. I guess now I just need to read Nora Roberts or something. Then came my saving grace, because then I read Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. And my heart, it stopped. I hate that I said that. For those who don't know, Heartstopper it was an online comic series created by Alice Oseman that was turned into sort of these physical volumes. This is the first volume, and it follows 2 boys in high school, Nick and Charlie. Charlie, who has come out as gay at some point before the story started, in graphic novel version begins to explore the very beginning of a relationship between these 2 boys. Just read it. Just read it. It's a graphic novel. The illustrations are adorable. It will take you like an hour to get through. I'm still kind of new to the world of graphic novels, but this was an easy 5 stars for me. It was adorable. It got at so well those like initial kind of like crush beginnings of a relationship. It was just so good. And I read this and I closed it and I cried and I was like, I'm not too old. We loved it. It was so good. Just read it. We have nearly made it to the end, and we're going to end off on a high note because I'm going to finish with Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. And my heart. This book is about our main character, Darius, who is half Persian, growing up in the United States, a little bit of a loner, doesn't have a ton of friends. His grandfather on his mom's side is very sick, so his family takes a trip to Iran for the first time in his life and tells the story of him exploring the country that his family is from, exploring his own identity, making what is really his first friend that he's ever had. This has to be one of the best books I've ever read in terms of how it engages with mental illness. Darius struggles with depression. He takes medication for depression, as does his father, his relationship with his family. I feel like I'm not articulating it well, but this was an easy 5 stars for me and is one of my favorite books of the year so far. The writing in it is beautiful. The story is beautiful. It was the exact kind of heartwarming thing that you need to read in the middle of a pandemic. I fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with the setting. If you're a fan of Star Trek, I would say definitely read this book because Darius and his dad share a love for Star Trek, which is referenced throughout the book. If you want a book that's kind of categorized as queer YA without the like heavy romance, this budding kind of friendship between Sohrab and Darius, which is alluded to kind of have romantic underpinnings, but not explicitly. Basically, just read it. I laughed, I cried. You know the warm, fuzzy feeling when you finish such a good book? This book gave me that. I feel like this has been an incredibly rambly video because I didn't plan it very well and because I read some of these books almost 2 months ago. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you got some book recommendations. Maybe you want to fight with me in the comments. We can have a fight, I guess, if you're into that. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you remarkably soon, probably for my October wrap-up and hopefully some other videos that aren't wrap-ups. And I hope that you have an incredible day.